Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Mental health during COVID-19 has been a real issue. Lots of people have been focused on it. And so I thought I'd reach out to Rebecca Burrows. She's a psychotherapist with the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario, currently working in private practice in Halton Region. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology, a Master's of Arts degree in counseling psychology, a certificate in intensive sex therapy, and is currently working towards the completion of her doctoral degree in counseling and psychotherapy. She has extensive experience working with survivors of violence and traumatic experience in both training and as a therapist. Her practice focuses on supporting individuals to work together to solve current problems and improve positive thinking and behavior, while also addressing holistic problems that are having an impact on current functioning. Rebecca strives to remain client-centered and solution-focused, navigating clients towards developing life-changing habits, which will support their abilities to cope with any of life's various challenges. Sounds pretty impressive. So, Rebecca, what's going on? What's happening to your business during COVID? Like, are people reaching out to you all the time as sort of, I would expect, given all the comments about mental health issues?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me tonight, Brian. I really appreciate having these conversations about mental health. Absolutely. I have found that more and more people are reaching out. However, I think it's also really important to acknowledge that the mental health crisis didn't just start when the pandemic began. So there's been a hidden mental health crisis for a very long time. And while people had coping strategies and were functioning, the pandemic, of course, brings out new challenges. And so roughly probably about September was when I saw a huge influx, when the reality that the pandemic wasn't going away and that the virus was here, and more people needed to reach out for further support. And
why do you say there was a hidden mental health crisis?
Pardon?
Why do you say there was a hidden mental health crisis before?
Well, with that, it's mental health concerns have always been here, but there's a large stigma around reaching out for support and getting the necessary strategies, the necessary supports and resources. And so it's always been there. And thankfully, and I'm very, very fortunate that probably in the last decade, more and more people are starting to talk about it. The stigma around mental health has decreased. And so while mental health has become a topic in the last year with the pandemic, I just think it's important to note that mental health concerns have been here for quite a while.
How'd you get into being a psychotherapist?
Well, you know what? I began my undergrad in psychology, and I was extremely fortunate to work with a professor at the University of Guelph in research, and I was a research assistant there, and I just have always had a passion for helping people, understanding behavioral concerns and issues and relations. And so I decided to pursue and become a therapist. And so through my master's, I started working in the violence against women sector. I became the supervisor for a sexual assault center. And that's where it really just took off in the last 5 years of really being passionate about supporting people while also recognizing that they have the ability and the skills to be successful. I am simply here to help them navigate to get to where they want to be.
Why'd you choose violence against women?
You know what? It kind of fell in my lap, to be honest. I had the privilege in my internship in my master's to experience violence against women group counseling. And it wasn't just, while it's called the VAW, and I think it's important to also note, it's not just women. I also support men who experience domestic violence, sexual violence. But I found a real passion through my internship, and I reached out to the local sexual assault center, and it just took off from there.
Has violence against women increased during the pandemic?
Sadly, yes. And the reason for that is with the working from home, the stay-at-home orders, more and more people are staying at home with their partners, and violence has increased.
Given that everyone's at home, it would probably be more difficult to escape that kind of a situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so it's my role to get creative, to work while I'm in private practice. I still consult with the sexual assault centers who consult with the police, and we get creative. So when it's nicer out, we'll do a walk therapy, a walk and talk. and start putting in place safety procedures, safety plans, what we would do before, but now we have to get creative so that we can protect these people.
We're chatting tonight with Rebecca Burrows, who is a registered psychotherapist in Halton, in Oakville. We're talking about the impact of COVID-19 on mental health, but also, other issues. And she's indicated that she thinks there's been a mental health crisis that was a little bit hidden previously, and she obviously is very involved in violence against women. So we're going to talk about all these issues during our show tonight. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Rebecca in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. Chatting today with Rebecca Burrows, who is a registered psychotherapist in Oakville with the College of Registered Psychotherapists, and she's working in private practice. She's spent a fair amount of time in violence against women, both from a research standpoint, but also from a practicing standpoint. And so I think we're going to come back and talk about that. But I really want to focus on COVID-19, if we could, for the next couple of minutes, Rebecca. We're getting inundated day in and day out with like disturbing media information. How do you advise people deal with all that?
Absolutely. There is so much information all the time. There's, whether it's through the media, through social media, we're being bombarded, we're being saturated, and acknowledging that the information is always changing. And so we do want to stay informed, because I think that's really important, that we do know what's happening and we know what the regulations are and restrictions, but we also have to give ourselves permission to take a break from that, give ourselves a moment to check out. And so whether that's scheduling a time where you're checking the news, maybe in the evenings, I find around 1 p.m. is when they have the briefings or any information from the last 24 hours, picking a time that works for you, where you can get the necessary information, and then give yourself permission to check out. Don't need to look at all the news all the time. There's no need to have the news on 24/7, whether it's the radio or the news. Pick your times and find a balance.
It's interesting. We're all stuck at home. Here I am in my home office, and haven't left it in 9 months, hardly, it seems. And people are feeling like it's Groundhog Day, that old movie, and they're repeating their same day over and over and over again. And I saw this funny thing that said that actually people are missing the commute, because the commute was that boundary between home life and work life. And so what this article suggested was go out and bike or walk for like 20 minutes to be a make-believe commute, that you're separating from the home life to now it's work time, and it's your time alone where you can listen to a podcast or tune out or just get some exercise as you're commuting. How do you recommend people separate out sort of home life from work life and find that balance that you mentioned?
Absolutely. And I love the idea of this commute, because I know for many people, whether it was 20 minutes or an hour, that was their time to get into the mode of their job. And when they left that day, they were leaving that part of them behind. And so finding that boundary. So one of the things about working from home, for those who are able to, have a designated area. For many people I talk to, they have an actual office space where they can close that door. Because it's far too easy to be available now by email, by phone, checking our emails at night. It's far too easy. So setting a schedule, setting a routine, and holding yourself accountable, that just as you would if you were at the office, you're not there now. When you are done at the end of the day, you are allowed to go into your other role of your personal life and do those things. You are not obligated to be working all the time. Set those boundaries.
But some employers demand it. What can companies do to make it easier on employees that are working from home?
Absolutely. There needs to be patience and there needs to be understanding. People have unique challenges. While they often say, we're all in the same boat. The truth is we're not. We are not all in the same boat. We are all facing the same storm, but how we are dealing with it and how we're coping is very unique to everyone, whether there's children at home and all of that. So open communication with employers, and I'm speaking to the employers. Have conversations, check in with your staff. And one of the questions is the workload still appropriate for the new circumstances? have these conversations. It can't be the expectations of work and home need to be reevaluated, and employers need to be open to that feedback.
You mentioned kids, children, and I think they're one of the people that have been impacted the most. You think about and lots of, you're probably the expert at this, not I, but lots of people have said that parents can have a huge impact on children until they're 6 or 8 or something like that. But after then, it's their peers that end up having a huge impact. And there's so many kids and teenagers that just aren't seeing their friends anymore, and if they are, they're seeing them online. And they may not have that separate office that you talked about. So they're in their bedroom all day long. It's where they sleep. That's where they socialize via whatever they're socializing on. And that's where they do their schoolwork. And that's got to be tough. What are you recommending for kids and teenagers that are stuck at home?
Absolutely. So with kids, with children who are younger, we want to really check in with them and how they're feeling. And they may not be able to, like adults or even teenagers, be able to express how they're actually feeling. So as the parent, we need to see what behavioral changes are happening. Ask them how they're feeling. We also don't want to pretend that this isn't real. So a lot of parents will ask me, do I tell them what's actually happening? How honest am I? We want to be age appropriate, but we do want to tell them what's happening. Why can't they see their friends? We want to be honest about what's really happening in the world and the virus, and that these children, they are also helping. They are helping people stay safe. And so we want to validate that this is hard. While adults, we have a little bit more ability to have these coping strategies and find things that work and sit in this uncomfortable space. For children and teenagers who are missing their teenage years at high school or the sports teams, we want to validate how they're feeling and see if we can get creative. So maybe when the weather's nicer, some social distancing if the regulations allow it. Maybe staying up a little bit later to watch a movie with friends on a Netflix party. Having some grace and giving everyone a little bit of self-compassion.
Okay, but validate and outside parties, something like that. I tried to have this conversation with a teenager, and she was saying, teenagers aren't getting sick. They're not getting the virus. They're not being impacted. The mortality rate, the hospitalization rate is next to zero for that age group. And all we're doing, said this teenager, was, saving you, older people that are potentially susceptible. It's not going to impact us. So why can't we just go on and live our regular life and we won't interact with you?
Well, absolutely. Their frustration is real. But unfortunately, it has to be, this is a community. This is a collective effort. And so while we can validate that the frustration is absolutely real, it's looking at the radical acceptance of this is our present state. Be frustrated, but the rules are the rules. And so if we can find alternatives, when you say about teenagers, well, then we just won't come around you. Well, where are they going to live? What about their grandparents? And it's not a scare tactic, it's reality. Okay, and Rebecca, everyone is at risk.
I'm sorry, you're a very smart psychotherapist. What the heck does validate mean? Like validate, like what are you saying when you say validate their feelings?
Be mad, be frustrated, be upset. It's not about suppressing our emotions. And thankfully, the teenagers in the generation now are validating their feelings. We're not, don't talk about it, get over it. No, you are frustrated. Grade 12s missing their prom, first-year university students missing residence. That's hard. And so when I say validate, be upset about it, but then see what we can do about it. What is in our control? Allowing these emotions to be real.
Allowing these emotions to be real.
Mm-hmm.
Being authentic, I guess, is what you're saying.
Be genuine. Be authentic. It's okay to have whatever feeling you're having, whether you're sad, whether you're mad, frustrated, annoyed, fed up.
Does this apply to adults as well? You were saying in the write-up that you sent me beforehand that people are feeling a lack of motivation, decreased joy, an inability to get excited about life. What's that all about?
Well, I think about it as the holiday season that just passed a few months ago. There was a lot of grief. There was a lot of frustration that holidays, birthdays, weddings, baby showers, all of those things are very different now. And so it's almost hard. I've heard from people, it's really hard to get excited for an upcoming wedding that is not going to be originally as planned. And so
I've heard
when
that
we
some
look,
people actually like weddings because they can spend the money on the bridal dress for the pictures, but they don't have to spend all the money on the big reception.
absolutely. I mean, smaller wedding definitely has its benefits. And this is what it's about, changing our perspective. Yes, we are not going to have the birthday celebrations that we planned. Maybe the baby shower or the weddings or whatever it is, the holidays and celebrations are not going to be the same. And we could sit in that and not enjoy it. But what we can do is reframe and change our perspectives and say, you know what, it's not going to be the same, but we can still find joy in difficult situations. We are allowed to actually have joy during this time.
But you know, people are feeling like it's Groundhog Day, and lack of motivation when it's the same drudgery day after day after day is an issue.
Absolutely. And what I like to talk about when they say I'm feeling a lack of motivation or an inability to find joy, this is not a reflection of who we are as individuals. I like to detach from that. This is a symptom of the pandemic. We do not need to take responsibility wholly for us not feeling motivated. Many people are emotionally fatigued, wanting to do the Zoom parties and this and all these other activities. When you're on Zoom all day, many people don't want to go on Zoom and chat with their friends for a few hours. And with the Groundhog Day, what else is there to talk about? And so we find balance in that.
What about some of our friends that have lost jobs, been furloughed, been laid off, or you know, maybe they work at a bar or restaurant and have been closed down?
It's tough. And that's the reality, is that many friends and family or acquaintances or even colleagues have been let go. And so we all have unique challenges. And so we don't want to sit here and assume what they're going through, what their challenge is. And so I say, be direct, ask them, be compassionate, and ask them, what do they need? But I also like when we talk with our colleagues or friends or family, ask them if they have the space to talk. We don't want to assume. So if someone says to you, how are you? Or say I've had a really long day and I want to vent to someone, or I want to sit there and complain to a girlfriend or whoever. I'm going to ask them, hey, you know what? I have a lot of things I want to get off my chest. Do you have the space? Do you have the emotional capacity to sit with me in this feelings that I'm having and support me?
I'm sorry, I can't sit there and ask someone, do you have the space to have a conversation with me?
I think we should all get used to that. I think it's boundaries, and I think it's a responsibility to our friends and our family. What are they dealing with? I have no idea what someone else has gone through that day. So why should I feel that I can dump on them? Have those conversations, and maybe it's not in that wording. Maybe you're checking in with them first, and then you read the room and say, you know what? They don't have that. So, I'm not going to get.
So have the space is really what you're saying, is read the room.
Yeah.
Understand. Yeah. And it's the old, be mindful of what the listener wants to convey, not necessarily what you want to say and talk about.
Absolutely. And you know what? If they don't have the space or they're not available, this is when our own personal wellness kit can come into place.
Right. Okay. What about, anxiety about infecting people? I think that some people are really worried about what they're going to do and don't want to get close to people at all because of anxiety, anxiousness about, they're going to infect them and maybe kill their grandmother.
Absolutely. And I want to normalize and let these people know that they are not alone in that fear. That is a genuine concern. And as time has passed and the regulations and restrictions of wearing a mask and washing our hands and doing all the things that we need to do to stay safe, there is still that fear. And so that's why we rely back on the regulations. When we start to feel that anxiety, am I doing something that I shouldn't be doing? Am I going to a social gathering where the risk is higher? What am I doing to protect myself? But also, what am I doing to protect other people?
Are you providing counseling to people in person or remote right now?
I'm remote. So I've been remote for almost a full year. I've moved my entire practice remotely. And so that's either online, like a video call, or on phone. And with that, it does have unique challenges, but I've seen so many benefits of being remote that a lot of clients don't actually mind it.
Do you think you can actually sort of connect with someone via online
This way,
videos?
absolutely. Absolutely. Did I find in March there was a starting disconnect? Absolutely. From someone who was never remote before and sitting there and connecting with that person, it takes some getting used to. Absolutely. But once you start having these genuine conversations, and these people are now at their homes. So whether they have their pet on their lap, which I often see, or they're wrapped up in a blanket, or they're having a cup of tea, they're in their safe space. So I'm actually finding that the connection is even greater because they are being more vulnerable, more genuine, and more open because they're in their safe space. And so many people have actually said that even if I do go back to remote, a few people have asked, can I stay being at home because this is kind of nice.
We're chatting tonight with registered psychotherapist Rebecca Burrows about the impact of COVID-19 on people's mental health. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back, and I'm going to ask Rebecca a little bit about her other practice in violence against women and sexual issues. We're going to take a break for a couple of minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Having an interesting conversation with Rebecca Burrows, who is a registered psychotherapist in Oakville, and she's been doing remote psychotherapy for the last 9 months or so, and people have found it really helpful. And she's had a couple of really good suggestions for me and for us in regards to dealing with challenges of COVID-19. But Rebecca, I wonder if we could go back to, you were telling us that you're doing a doctorate, and your doctorate's got something to do with abuse. Tell me what your doctorate's in.
Absolutely. So I'm doing my doctorate in counseling and advanced psychotherapy. And my dissertation is going to be exploring how intimacy and relationships are affected by sexual violence. And so what I'm looking at is basically when I first started my career, I was in the violence against women sector. I was a supervisor at a sexual assault center. And through that, what the feedback I got quite often from myself seeing clients as well as some other counselors was that individuals, both men and women, struggled to have intimacy or other relationships after they've experienced sexual violence or abuse. And so I really wanted to understand what that concern was and how we can promote intimacy. And if that's something that they're looking for, is how is sex impacted and how is intimacy impacted? So I went on to pursue a graduate certificate in intensive sex therapy. And now I'm working to look at this relationship. And so that's what my doctorate is going to focus on, as seeing how we can kind of look at desire and arousal, and also a lot of feelings around shame and guilt.
So this is someone that has been subject to a rape or some other type of sexual assault, and is it a trauma that sort of stays with them for a long period of time and harms them longer term, not only in their sort of mental health, but in their sexual health, I guess is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And this isn't just a recent sexual assault that people are coping with. This could also be something more historic, whether it's childhood abuse, childhood sexual assault, or it could be 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is, they've experienced some sort of trauma that has now impacted them in their new relationships. Or even if they're not in a new relationship, it comes with a lot of feelings of, if I do want a partner, what's that going to be like? And there's a lot of fear around that. And so working with people to kind of open that conversation.
Is it because of embarrassment or something, because of the prior sexual assault, or do they think everyone's going to assault them, or what is it? What's the source of it?
It's very individual, but the ones that I've come across is there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame and questions as to, Do I tell my partner what happened? Do I have to disclose what happened? The other big one is, what happens if I'm triggered? What's that going to look like? How do I have that conversation with someone if I am triggered?
What do you mean triggered?
Now, pardon?
What do you mean triggered?
So if they are engaging in any form of intimacy, what if they have a response, whether they start to cry, whether they react getting angry, they have to run away, whatever it is that their response is, might not be what they feel comfortable with. And so it's saying what might happen. And so we have to, instead of planning the what ifs, we start with the individual and them getting comfortable with what intimacy is for them.
I interviewed another psychotherapist on this topic, and what she was saying is that one of the challenges that a lot of people that are abused become abusers. Is that true?
So what I say to that is, if we look at perpetrators, most often, if we look at their history, perpetrators do tend to have a history of being abused themselves to whatever degree. Does abuse mean they will become a perpetrator? No, I don't think that's a fair statement, given that I work with people who have been abused themselves and they in no way would ever harm someone else. So I think it's the other way.
What's the other way? The other way
is that most perpetrators have some sort of abuse to them, but not all people who are abused become perpetrators.
Okay, I understand. And so if someone is a perpetrator that was abused, how would you deal with that?
Well,
same way you would someone else that's been abused?
Absolutely. We would just do trauma therapy and work with them, but I don't work often with perpetrators. The ones that I have, we work on trying to understand their behaviors, their choices, what has led them to be a perpetrator or to behave in certain ways. I want to understand why they behave the way that they do. And that's the fascinating thing about human behavior, is that we can sit here and have these conversations, a therapist to a client, and really understand what's going on.
How do you do that? Just talk?
Yeah, we talk, but the very first thing to do is build trust. I in no way, whether it's a perpetrator or someone who's been abused or anyone coming to see me, I in no way assume that they trust me. I am a person that they have found either through a referral, online. All they see is my profile. And so it takes a while to build that therapeutic relationship. No one's coming into my office and telling me everything about themselves. They want to assess what I'm going to do to help them and support them. And through these conversations, we get to the root. And it takes time. It does. And that's one of the things about counseling and therapy, is that it's not a one session fix.
I've also heard from another psychotherapist that a lot of people that have been abused end up falling into addiction of some sort or other. Is that true?
Addiction is definitely a coping strategy. It absolutely is a coping strategy, because the consequences of abuse is nightmares, flashbacks, an inability to sleep, an inability to get up in the morning and function. And so they reach for coping strategies, and sometimes it is drugs or alcohol. And so that correlation is very prevalent, but it's not necessarily a guarantee.
So if someone's got an addiction problem and it comes from, some other reason versus an addiction problem because of abuse, do you deal with that addiction in a different manner?
We're going to deal with the trauma. So I am a harm reduction therapist. And what that means is that when someone comes to tell me, or someone comes to see me and they have an addiction, I'm not telling them to stop cold turkey. I'm not telling them, don't do that, don't behave like that. You know what? Instead of using, I want you to read a book. No. What we're going to do is we're going to start building that therapeutic relationship so that they can trust me, that there are other coping strategies for alternatives to what they are using, while also dealing with the trauma in a safe environment.
So what does an addict say to Rebecca Burrows when she says, instead of taking a hit of something or other, read a book?
Well, I absolutely wouldn't say that. because I would probably be told in not so nice language to go away. We want to be compassionate. The way I look at it is they've been using, or whatever their vice is, to get them in the door to see me. They have survived everything that they have been through. And so whatever they did or whatever they're using to get them to seek support, I'm there to support them. And I want to keep them in that chair sitting across from me.
So I've heard of a couple of different therapies. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about them or what you use. CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, or DBT, dialectic behavior therapy, or something called something T.
EMDR.
EMDR, eye movement, something or other therapy. Tell me about what you think of these different therapies, or what you use.
Absolutely. And so DBT I don't use. And so that is, all these different modalities have different trainings. And so there are specific DBT therapists, and they have their different ways of approaching. I am a CBT therapist, and so that's cognitive behavioral therapy. And so in some of what we've been talking about, I use words like reframing. And with that, with cognitive behavioral therapy, we are looking at your thought process. So one of these things, when we talked about not being able to find joy in moments, the unhelpful thought would be, well, I'm so upset. I'm not going to be able to have this wedding. I'm not going to be able to have this party. I'm so upset. I hate this. I'm so frustrated. We're going to validate that. Yes, change is hard. But a more helpful thought is, me not having this event means I'm keeping people safe, and that when I am able to do it, more people will be there, and it'll be a safer place, and we'll still have joy. And so we're changing the way we think of things. And don't get me wrong, it's not just like a light switch. You're not having one thought and I'm changing it to something else. We're going to sit in that space of moving. When you have a negative thought, what's another perspective? What's another way to look at it that's a little bit more helpful? And so that's the CBT, is the thought processing, your cognitive restructuring, looking at how you're thinking about things in your perspective.
Okay. And can you describe how it's different than DBT, or because you're not trained in it?
I'm not trained in DBT, so I can't really speak to DBT. One of the ones different little techniques in it. So radical acceptance, which I mentioned earlier, is a DBT strategy. And that is about looking at your reality without an intense desire to change it. And so that is an incredible strategy to use. It's just different strategy.
Hold it. So a radical strategy, you say, is accepting your current reality. So if the person's an addict, they're going to accept that they're an addict.
No. So when I talk about radical acceptance, it's not necessarily used for addiction. I am not an addiction specialist. And so I don't actually see any clients with addictions. And so I'm sure other places and other therapists have the way that they would use.
Okay. And what's this eye movement thing?
Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. It is an incredible trauma-informed approach. So EMDR, what it is it's basically, I'm going to work with someone to bring up a painful, traumatic memory. And what it's doing is, while they're telling me this, I'm asking how intense that memory is. And then we're going to start doing bilateral stimulation. So many people do it differently. The simple basic one is following my hand movements with your eye. And what this is doing is, while we bring up a memory, we're now going to talk about other things, other memories, or other moments that de-escalate the intensity. And so that's the desensitization. The reprocessing portion of it is, we're actually putting something more positive, not a positive spin on something that happened, but basically what it is we're reprocessing these memories so that when they do come up, they're not as triggering. And so many people are still able to do EMDR remotely. I currently do not do it remotely. And so I've had people ask me, and I refer them out to people who specifically are doing it remotely. But the research shows that this is an incredible modality, strategy for dealing with trauma.
Okay. So let's come back to your thesis.
Yes.
Where are you in the process?
Well, this was actually a pandemic decision. And what I mean by that is my caseload back in the summer had decreased. And I thought, you know what more can I do? What else can I do? I'm seeing some more problems, some more concerns. What can I do to kind of level up? How can I get better to provide better support? And so I decided, you know what, I've got some time. Let's apply. Let's see what happens. And so I actually only started my doctorate degree in September. So I'm simply in my second term. And it's this week on Thursday that my topic proposal will be put forth to the advisors, and we'll start planning the next steps for that. And so it's just at the very
Good luck with
infancy
your
stage.
research proposal.
Pardon?
Good luck with your topic proposal.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it.
How do you propose to do the research?
I'm not sure yet. Right now, like I said, it's at the very beginning stages where I've really honed in on the topic. And now this week is where I get to spend a whole lot of time researching, finding out what I want to do with this information and how I want to proceed.
And how do you think, if you're successful, you'll be able to change, thinking? Because that's what a thesis is supposed to do. It's supposed to change thinking, right?
I want to work with people so that they understand that they can have happy, healthy sexual health, sexual relationships. But I also want to note it's not just about sex with a partner and intimacy. I want to work with individuals with themselves, getting comfortable with themselves, exploring themselves. What is desire? What is arousal for them? Start with them as the individual. And if they choose to be with a partner, what does that look like for them? I want to put the power and the control back into their worlds.
Fascinating. Sounds like it's going to be an interesting thesis and an interesting project.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to it.
Well, we'll have to check back in and hear more about it after your thesis proposal gets adjudicated. We're going to take a break with Rebecca Burrows and come back in just a minute and have some concluding comments. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio, our second and 60. We're chatting tonight with Rebecca Burrows, a registered psychotherapist with the College of Registered Psychotherapists in Ontario. And she's practicing in Halton, though remotely, and specializes, it would appear, in people that have got some trauma, mental health issues. A lot of them, it would appear to be sexual abuse issues. And she's doing her thesis, or at least attempting to do her thesis in that regard. But we've talked primarily about COVID-19, and she's got an interesting wellness. What do you call it? A wellness
toolkit.
Wellness toolkit that she wants to share with us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Absolutely. And so basically, a lot of people will come to me and ask, what do I do for self-care? And for many people, that is a big word of, where do I start? What do I do? Where do I go from that? And so in order to make it a little bit easier, I break down the areas of wellness. And what I like to do is do a check-in. I consider this filling your bucket. So asking yourself, what are you doing to take care of yourself? What are the things that are working and what's not working? And so by breaking it down into categories, we have a better idea of, for instance, rating ourselves on 1 to 10 of how well we're doing in one category, gets us to know also, what are we doing well? Because I think it's also important that we acknowledge we are doing some things pretty well, but there's some areas that we could focus on. So some of the areas are like our physical wellness, exercise. But also beyond that is our nutrition. For many people who were commuting or going to the office, you probably were meal prepping, making a lunch. Now, maybe you're just grabbing something on the go, making time for eating our meals, making time maybe for a 15-minute body movement. For instance, when people would go and get a coffee break or meet at the water cooler, we don't have that anymore. So find new things to do. The psychological or our mental care is maybe daily journaling. What did I do well today? Practicing some gratitude, or listening to a podcast like we earlier talked about on our commute. Listening to a podcast maybe 15, 20 minutes before we start work or on our lunch or even in the evenings. as well as asking yourself if maybe you need a little extra support and reaching out for some personal therapy. The one I like the most is our environmental care. So working from home, we have that boundary between our office and our home life. And so keeping our office as separate as possible, but for many people who are maybe working at the kitchen, are we able to close down our laptops, move away from it so that we can take care of our environment? For many people who are lucky enough that their home is their sanctuary. So
I like your
having that space.
spiritual cultural care. Tell us, what do you do for spiritual or cultural care?
For spiritual or cultural, it is about connecting to a larger purpose. So for myself, it's making sure I'm walking out in nature. And now that it's gone a little bit warmer, getting out there, connecting, and just being out there and being a part of it, because it's so easy for us to stay in our four walls of our home. Spiritual and cultural care can mean anything for anyone. Perhaps it is religious and they need to connect online with whatever's available to them, or worship or prayer, even a yoga practice or practicing mindful meditation. Now, I know meditation for a lot of people is difficult. If you're going to try and do a 15K run, you're not walking out the door and going for a 15K run. You're going to start small. And so I want to focus on a mindfulness or meditation that's also small. And that might just be taking a moment to unclench your jaw, release the tension in your shoulders, take a big, deep breath, fill your lungs up, feel your shoulders rise. And as you let that air out, you feel your shoulders come down, your jaw unclench. And that was just 10, 15 seconds of just giving yourself a moment to
Relax.
Yeah.
Rebecca Burrows, thank you so much. You've been very, very open and incredibly articulate, and shared with us some good tools and lots of interesting lessons, both about COVID-19 and how to deal with it, as well as sexual assault and some of the trauma associated with that, and how people can deal with that through cognitive behavior therapy or something else that you mentioned. I didn't know what this
That's EMDR.
EMDR
Yes.
sounded like it was a lot of fun. If people want to contact you, access some of your services, is there a website you can direct them to?
Absolutely. And so my practice is called Burrows Counseling and Consulting. So you can find me on Google, as well as looking up Rebecca Burrows on Psychology Today. Psychology Today is the best website in order to find a therapist in your area. But with remote, I am providing across the GTA and beyond, as well as you can find me on my website. And so I can provide you that link as well, but it's Burrows Counseling and Consulting, or you can simply email me at rebeccaburrows.info@gmail.com.
Awesome. Rebecca Burrows, thank you so much for joining us. That's our show for tonight, everybody. I come to you every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM, or you can stream me online at saga960am.ca, or on my podcasts and videocasts are on my website, briancrombie.com. I'm also on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Good night, everybody.